The following program is an Arnold Shapiro production, which is made possible by USAA. This program contains mature subject matter, which includes strong language and explicit descriptions of child abuse offenses. Viewer discretion is advised.
He told me if I told anybody, he was gonna kill me.
My husband didn't have an affair. He went out and made mistresses out of my daughters.
There's almost not a day that goes by that I don't think about what I did with my children.
What is worse than a mother who takes her own child's life?
That poor kid. I really need to stop this. Why can't I?
I'm Oprah Winfrey, and like millions of other Americans, I'm a survivor of child abuse. I was only 9 years old when I was raped by my 19-year-old cousin. He was the first of 3 family members to sexually molest me. I kept the abuse a secret over 20 years. Every year in America, nearly 3 million cases of child abuse are reported. Who knows how many go unreported? We're here tonight to fight this national epidemic of child abuse and neglect. You're about to meet 6 perpetrators of sexual, physical, and psychological child abuse. And while their stories may shock you, they are frighteningly typical of the 7,300 cases of abuse and neglect reported every day. We hope the stories of these abusers and their victims can help all the children and adults among us who, for too long now, have been scared silent. Contrary to popular belief, most child molesters are not strangers. Practically all child sexual abuse is inflicted by a close family member or friend. A warning: you're about to hear some graphic descriptions of sexual abuse. But to stop and to prevent this crime against children, we need to face the hidden truth.
And in the beginning, probably up until I was 11, there was just really just heavy, petting, touching, and probably like oral sex. But then when I was 11 or 12, it started to become intercourse, and really frequently, maybe once or twice a week.
There were times in my mind when I couldn't wait for her to mature more, to be ready for intercourse. But at the same time, I refrained, thinking at the same time that was, it just can't go that far. I can stop it before then. And I couldn't.
Dell is 48 and a successful engineer. He sexually molested his daughter Eva from age 7 to 21, and his younger daughter Bonnie from age 9 to 14. Like so many families in which incest occurs, they appeared normal from the outside.
My dad was an usher at church. Mom was a part of the PTA. It was really important to look good to everyone else because it looked so bad from the inside.
I really don't know when a sexual attraction started. I know that teaching her to swim as a young girl, touching and feeling in a way that she didn't know what was going on yet. Once I realized that Eva would allow me to do certain things, then I could push her to do more, because her whole goal in life was to make Dad happy. I don't ever recall thinking of her as a child. In my mind, she was more an adult.
I was isolated from my brother and sister. I felt really alone. So when somebody gave me attention, that is my dad, it was sort of attention that I needed and was missing but also he had planned it that way. He'd planned for me to be needing that and missing that. He usually started out asking if we could go out for a date, ice cream, a movie, or something, and I always knew what that meant. If it was or something, I was in trouble. Then he usually would want me to be in a skirt, a change clothes, into something that was easily accessible to him, which made me really feel sick because I felt like a slut. I felt like I was making myself open for something that I didn't enjoy.
Part of the grooming is to indicate that, you can't tell anybody about this because they'll come in and break up the family. And to a child, that's their world. So you don't need force to put them into a fear mode that's greater than you can imagine.
Incest is the whole family's problem. Like many mothers of sexual abuse victims, Dell's wife, Jan, was herself molested as a child. Since she couldn't bear to face the pain of her own abuse, she shut out the signs of her daughter's suffering.
I felt somewhere in the pit of my stomach that something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. I ignored all the clues and the symptoms and the feelings and thought there was something wrong with me, that I would even think something like that.
The signs that she was not getting was the fact that I was a very sad kid. If this was such a great family, why was I so sad? Why couldn't I look people in the eye? And why did I walk funny? By the time I reached an age where I knew it was wrong, it was so inbred in me. Part of me was kept a child. I wasn't 21 somewhere inside. I was still 7 or 8.
It wasn't until Eva was a young adult and had spent time away from her family that she was finally able to break 13 years of silence.
I took my sister out for coffee. I go, okay, do you know what it means to be molested? And she went, Eva, I know. I'm being molested too. At that point, I was furious. It wasn't for myself that I could stop it. It was for somebody else. We decided to wait till the next morning to say anything to my mom.
And I said, we can't stay in the same house for another hour. We just can't. I opened the safe. We own a gun. I took the bullets, the clip from the gun, because I didn't know what Dell would do when he found out that we were gone. I thought he might try to kill himself.
And I just remember her saying to my dad, we know what you've done. Damn you. And I can't believe that she ever, would come to our rescue like that.
It was like 500 pounds of cement was lifted off my shoulders. I felt like I was going to collapse, but I sat down and I said, thank God it's over. Now what do we do?
Dell pleaded guilty to sexual abuse charges and served 1 year in jail. During 3 years of separation from his family, he has undergone intensive therapy to help him recover from his abusive behavior and to uncover its roots. Dell's history revealed severe emotional cruelty at the hands of his stepfather, and like 70% of all men who molest children, Dell himself had been sexually abused by a neighbor when he was 6.
I came from a very strict religious family that didn't even say words like sex. There was just no way I could communicate that this 20-year-old boy next door did something to me out in the barnyard. So in order to make sure that nothing like that ever happened again, I had to be in control of my life and everybody around me forever. For years, Eva pretty well lived under my command. One of the things that I feel very strongly about as part of the recovery process, for me, is to gain trust again with my daughter somehow.
Do I think my dad's really in recovery? I reserve that. I don't know.
Changes were calling, but did I have to say goodbye? I don't know. It seemed right to
After 3 years of no contact with her father, Eva made the courageous decision to confront him for the first time about the scars he's left on her life.
I'd like him to know how much he's hurt me, how much he's hurt every other person in this world that I love. The damage that was done was to my self-respect, to my ability to have other people around me that love me. I don't let them. I always want to know what they want in return.
This meeting was really kind of like a last chance. What if all she sees is the same old dad? Well, I've said I'm sorry several times, but that's really, I wish I could say it in a way that she'd believe it and know it.
What do you want to be? Do you know what you want from me? And if we ever meet again, can we still be friends?
Seems like it's been a lot longer than 3 years. I have a ton of apologies. I mean, I don't know what you want to hear.
I don't think that I want apologies. I think I just want some understanding, maybe some rationality.
There's nothing rational about what I did. You were the first person in my life that I knew loved me. Before that, in my own mind, I was really unlovable.
No, I feel that way.
I'm sure.
But that doesn't mean I'm gonna go out and molest my kids.
No, most likely, unless you get a lot of counseling, you'll go out and end up marrying a molester.
I know we have a lot of work to do. We're not gonna finish it today. And it's not gonna be suddenly, you know, going and having picnics together all the time. It's not gonna be like that.
I don't want to, draw a picture of what family life ought to be and expect everybody to jump into it. I just don't want to be out of the picture.
You're really lucky that you're still part of the picture.
I knew this wasn't going to work out easy.
I see you being very vulnerable, and my first reaction would be to want to take care of you and make sure you didn't hurt. And that's exactly what I've done all my life, and I don't want to do that.
Well, we've all done our roles and taken care of each other in the areas that we learn how to do.
Well, I don't like the one I learned.
It's difficult to understand how you can love someone so much and do so much damage to them. My daughters had something taken away from them, and it was me that took it away.
I would say to anybody else who's like my dad, who wants to do the things my dad did, I know you have problems. Don't take it out on your kids, because it's not their fault. You know, don't create this hell that you live in for them, too.
If you or someone you know is involved in a child abuse situation, please call this toll-free number for assistance, 1-800-4-A-CHILD. Many abused children grow up and never harm another person, but others vent their rage on themselves or on the rest of us. Some victims who don't get help go on to become abusers even before they've reached adulthood. 60 to 80% of adult sex offenders started molesting as adolescents.
My name is Tasha. I'm a sex offender. The reason why I'm on Waypoint Unit because I sexually molested a girl.
Tasha is 15 and in her short life has sexually abused at least 5 other children, ranging in age from 7 to 12 years old. She's in group therapy with other juvenile sex offenders at the Waypoint program, a lockup facility for children who have become molesters. The average age for their first offense, 11 years old.
I've never met an adolescent sex offender who came from a normal background. Tasha is typical in the Waypoint program. Her past history is a very chaotic family life. She was sexually abused by a member of her family for many years. Some of that involved force and violence, and some pretty severe history of abuse.
I'm gonna talk about my last victim. He's a boy. He's in my family. It took me 2 to 3 weeks to set up what I was gonna do to him. He was around about 7 years old. I rubbed my body up against him when other people was not around. I do it when he's sitting down somewhere or staying up. I sexually fondled him. I had full intercourse. I always picked victims that were younger than me because I know that I can take power control over them. That power was like, it felt real good. I was getting a kick out of it. I did not feel remorse whatsoever. I didn't care if they would have had nightmares about it. If that happened to me, it's gonna happen to you too. I picked a fight with him outside one day and kind of throw him around a little bit, but I didn't mean to hurt him that bad. I punched one of his teeth out. I broke his arm.
What made you want to do all that to him?
Because he was a guy. It was a boy.
This is her only male victim that we know of.
Yeah.
Somebody want to find out what that's all about?
Yeah, and you committed this offense when you was 12 years old. Was it before or after your brother had started molesting you?
It was after.
What's the worst thing your brother did to you when he abused you, Tasha, that brings up all this anger towards guys and towards this victim?
He fondled me with objects. Pencils, deodorant bottles, circle bottles, brooms.
How you feel after he did all that to you? I mean, like, didn't you have a lot of problems?
I had a lot of problems. I couldn't barely use the bathroom. I had blood in my pants all the time. I would walk funny. My mom would ask me what was wrong. I mean, I lied to my mom for what my brother did to me. I covered his ass, knowing that what he did to me was wrong.
Let it out. Let it out, Tasha.
After he did that to me, I took a shower. I mean, I stayed in the bathroom for wholly 3 hours taking a shower because of him. Touching me on my body that I didn't want it to be touched. I had to drink a whole bottle of mouthwash. I had to wipe the blood up off the floor. This shit pisses me off. I'm getting sick and tired of my whole life. All my life I was getting offended. I got offended by my uncle. I got offended by my brother.
I think a lot of people have difficulty understanding why a victim might become an offender. And they ask themselves, well, if it was done to them, why don't they understand how it felt when they're doing it to somebody else? But remember, the offender is not conscious of what their victim is feeling. The victim is simply an object. The offender is not in touch with what it felt like to them at the time. That's something we take them back to in treatment in order to teach them remorse. Tasha, I'm going to point something out to you that I think you're ready to hear. Do you see the way you feel about your brother and all the feelings you're expressing now? Do you see that your victims may feel the same way about what you did to them?
Yep. Yep.
Talk to us about that.
My victims will probably hate me, especially the 7-year-old. I did this to my cousins, man, and my family. I screwed their lives up.
Y'all always walking around here saying putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Before you put yourself in anyone's shoes, you should put yourself in your victim's shoes. That's what I'm doing, man. I can't believe I did this shit. I was at 11 years old and I couldn't stand nobody touching me.
Tasha's prognosis is very good. The key for Tasha is going to be able to continue this type of work when she needs to leave this facility. She's come a long way. Now, that's not to say that she's cured, because she'll never be cured. But that's to say that she's learned some skills that we hope will benefit her when she leaves this program.
If I wouldn't come here, I would have been still molested. And I know that for a fact. I am so happy that I'm here. I don't want to do it anymore. Because I know I done messed up somebody else's life for a whole life. And I don't want to do it anymore.
Every day throughout America, parents accidentally and intentionally cross the line that separates discipline from abuse. The ultimate consequence of this violence is that every day, 4 children die from abuse or neglect.
Once upon a time, my father told me that when us children came, he knew that there were 2 ways to raise children. One was through love, and the other was through fear, and he didn't know how to love. So he raised us through fear.
You can't always recognize fear in a photograph album.
This is Grandma.
When Jill, now 52, and her brother Dave look back on their childhood, they remember what lay behind the smiles in the family portraits.
I think to the outside world, our family appeared pretty normal. In reality, living inside my family was like living in a concentration camp.
Dad was like the secret police. You never knew when he was going to come in.
We very seldom got spankings. It was beatings.
I walked out of the bathroom right into my dad's fist because I had woke him up by flushing the toilet, and he beat me.
And Dad had come home in a bad mood, and I picked the pork chop off the serving platter that he had wanted for himself, and because of that, he beat me, and then he choked me to unconsciousness. No one could do anything. The police wouldn't, the social agencies wouldn't. Dad owned us kids. This is how far I can trace back the abuse.
Jill has been able to trace the abuse in her family back 130 years to the time of the Civil War.
From what I can find out from Dad and from the rest of the family, he was as abused as we were. He was beaten by his mother. His father was an alcoholic. So we can go back with this 5 generations. And of course, our own kids have picked it up. Your daughter gave her child up for adoption because she was afraid of battering him.
And so in Jill's family, it just kept happening generation after generation after generation because there was no way to interrupt it and nobody stopped it. And it kept being acceptable and forgotten about and not talked about.
A part of me still loves him, but the larger part is just so angry. Just so angry.
And one of the biggest feelings that gets stopped in physical abuse, well, any abuse, but physical abuse, is the feeling of rage and anger about what's happening and the humiliation and shame about being treated in such a disrespectful, horrible manner.
So life is not fair, but to have to spend my first 20 years, my first 30 years, to being told how awful I am. How am I supposed to build a life after that?
Jill's first marriage ended in divorce and severe depression. 4 years later, she met her second husband. They had 2 sons, Roger and Carl, and lived in an affluent suburban neighborhood.
This is where I lived for 15 years. We had a very nice life on the outside, but I was still very much dealing with the rage. I didn't know how to be a mother. I didn't know the difference between discipline and abuse. My son had developed colic, and one day I was just exhausted and I wanted to take a nap, and my son was crying again, as usual. And so I put him in his carriage in the basement and stuffed a cloth in his mouth to keep him quiet. I could have killed him. I could have smothered him.
25 years later, Jill returned to the house where in 1967, her unresolved rage finally caught up with her.
That rage is right below the surface, and that rage can funnel up or blow up at any time.
Then one weekend, I just snapped. I had spent the whole day cleaning house, and it looked spotless. And the kids got up early, and they'd gotten in the kitchen and got potato chips out and had just scattered potato chips all over the floor, my nice clean floor that I worked so hard to get. It was just like it was the last straw. And I got mad. And I told Roger to go to bed, and he did. And I picked Carl up and I carried him into his room. And I just wanted them to get in bed and stay there so I could clean up the living room. And I came back and I picked up the curtain rod and I went over to Roger and whacked him a couple of times on the back end, whacked Carl a couple of times, and walked back to the door. And when I threw the curtain rod, and I don't remember seeing it fly. I don't remember seeing it land. There's about a full minute there that I don't remember, and I choose not to remember. I don't think I could live through that again. But I saw the blood gushing out of his eye.
In that moment, the curtain rod hit 3-year-old Roger with enough force to pierce his eye and pass into his brain.
I had never abused the children to the point where they had to be hospitalized. I didn't even think of myself as an abuser at that time. It just didn't occur to me. I went into his room, and he had tubes and wires everywhere, and I felt so helpless. Just helpless. There was nothing I could do. Although the hospital's changed a lot, I could remember the waiting. And I could see Roger in that bed. And the waiting, and the guilt, and the wondering what's going to happen. The first thing my dad said to me when we walked in the hospital was, the sins of the fathers are visited on the daughters. Everything I'd feared from my father killing me, and now I've killed my son. Roger died at 2:30 in the morning. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, the phone started ringing because there had been a story about his death. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, the police came and arrested me.
Jill was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and faced a sentence of 1 to 20 years in the state penitentiary. Her conviction was overturned on appeal. In the words of the court, there was no evidence of unnatural beating, either on the morning of the injury or any other time, and that Jill was a normal mother, interested in the welfare of her family.
Things have changed a lot in the last 25 years. The rules have changed. The way society views child abuse has changed. No, I don't think I would be acquitted today. If there had been the kind of resources 25 years ago that there are now, you better believe I would have used them. But no matter what the courts say, I'm responsible for my son's death. I killed my son. Accident or design, I killed my son. And there's no way I can get away from that. I will have to live with that the rest of my life.
If you or someone you know is involved in a child abuse situation, please call this toll-free number for assistance, 1-800-4-A-CHILD. There's another form of abuse that's more difficult to recognize and to prosecute. Psychological or emotional abuse consists of the cruel, thoughtless words and rejecting actions that make children and teenagers feel worthless, unlovable, and stupid. Those feelings can become self